Hello everybody, it's me, Riffraff Hornhelm, and I'm back again with another presentation from the Dwarven Vault. And today, we have a monster review. And the monster we're going to talk about today is the ETTERCAP. The ETTERCAP. And that's coming to us from the original FIEND FOLIO, which was a accessory that was used with primarily Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, or what's typically called 1E today, though backwards compatibility was good. And this is an interesting creature from the FIEND Folio, both from a creature standpoint and, well, as you'll see, it can also help to create a very amusing set of discussions around the table when you play with one of these versus a party, or more than one of these. Now, these aren't real big creatures. I mean, as you can see here, they're bipedal. They're really long arms and a pot belly and short legs, and they're kind of scruffy, hairy, not particularly pleasant to look at. They have armor class of 6, that's no real big deal, and they don't fight by weapon type. They only have 5 hit dice, so not that powerful of a creature. And they have a couple of big fangs that stick out on either side of their mouth that are poisonous, so that's an issue. And of course they have 2 claw attacks. None of these are particularly damaging. The claw attacks are 1 to 6, and the bite attack is 1 to 8, but you must save versus poison, or you're gonna die. Okay, that's bad. Now, like I said, they're not very smart. They're evil, and they're considered to be very treacherous and cunning, but low intelligence kind of limits that to some degree. But they do have a very, very interesting trick. Now, what might that be, you say? Well, they have a close relationship with spiders. And the trick is that very near their anus, wow, that's pretty funny. I get to say that on a show and everything. But they have a gland next to their anus that secretes a silken silvery cord like spiderweb. Now, the ETTERCAP will use that in order to make weapons, say weave a net, or it's not sticky like spiderweb is, but they can use it to make things. A garrote, a lariat, something of that nature that they can use to attack and corral their potential victims. So they have this ability to create this silken strand, and they use it, like I said, for all kinds of purposes to help them in their quest to both eat food and catch things to eat, and because they're treacherous and cunning and probably like spiders are going to have maybe a similar diet. It's kind of thin on the ground in the book on this in terms of, well, where would you find these and what do they eat? Do they specifically like to go after humans or something like that? Nah, that's not really covered. But because of their close association with spiders, we'll use that as a primary model and say that, yeah, they're probably opportunists and they'll catch whatever they can catch to eat. Because they're low intelligence, they don't really use weapons other than what they create themselves. It's unclear as to how much treasure would be of interest to them or of use to them. But they can add some fun into an encounter. You can imagine people, your party members and so forth. They're not generally going to be that familiar with the contents of the FIEND Folio. And the ETTERCAP is possibly one that they've never run across or don't know for sure what it all can do. So once they figure out that they're spinning essentially a web from, it appears to be, out their ass, like I said, it can lead to some interesting conversations around the table. Now, as a dwarf, do we run across ETTERCAPs? Well, believe it or not, it is possible because they like to hang out in the same kind of venues that spiders typically do. So, dank, dismal, dark, sometimes wet places, places where you would typically find a spider web, would have the opportunity to feel all home-like, I guess, for the ETTERCAP. Now, this is a presumption on my part because of the fact that this is so sparse in there. I've used them in underground scenarios against my parties as they came through. The adventurers would have an encounter with ETTERCAPs. Didn't really use them as wanderings. I used them as set piece monsters, but I thought they were an awful lot of fun. They do typically appear as a wandering. It doesn't necessarily have to be one. It can be several. And that gives you some options if you're trying to create a encounter using this creature. This is one that takes some good role playing on the Dungeon Master's part. You can have an awful lot of fun with this. It can really make the day difficult for your party, but it's kind of up to your DM as to how artful you are in using this creature. Now, as dwarves, I mean, do we ever run across ETTERCAPs? Yeah, I've heard of it. It must not be around this area because it was only in talking to some dwarves in some rather far off places that they said, yeah, we ran into these. That was mainly in the Eastern Hemisphere, and I guess these could be run into in deep, dark, dense jungles, which is something I hadn't thought about, but at the end of the day, it makes some sense. The encounters on these have generally fared very poorly for the ETTERCAPs, but a lot of that has to do with they may be cunning, but they just aren't smart. So, of course, in the gaming world, how many people have run into an ETTERCAP? How many DMs have used an ETTERCAP? Once again, in discussion with the greater Hornhelm community, I find that there are some selective creatures from FIEND FOLIO that have become much more canon over time, and others that have either ceased to be used or have fallen out of frequent usage. For some odd reason, the ETTERCAP seems to be one of these. From people who played in the days of yore, which means a long time ago, I did not find that many people who had used it. But the consensus from the DM side, for those who had used it, was that this was a pretty cool creature. And they ranked it a 2.5 to a 3.5. And yeah, the top end of that might be a little bit high because these guys really don't have all that much. And, once you understand what they're doing, they're easier to deal with. They don't have any special magic resistance. They don't have any special resistance to weapons. So you can definitely kill these. But that was the range that the DMs gave. Now, of course, in talking to the players, well, they always have a different viewpoint of it. They came back and they gave this a solid 3 to 4. I was very surprised by that. But mind you, I had a hard time finding people who had fought these before. And the general consensus is that they were pretty good because the ones they had run into had spent some time using their unique opportunities created by the web stuff that they could spit out to lay some fairly elaborate traps and nets and this kind of stuff. And it made them a lot more difficult to get through. Okay, it's kind of hard on this one because, frankly, there just wasn't that many people I would run across on either side of the coin that had run into an ETTERCAP. I have used them before, but it's been a long time, and I thought they were kind of neat. I have to say I modified the ones that I had to give them more intelligence. I still found them to be a pretty interesting creature to put up against the party. But once again, it's up to what the players say on that side, and they gave it a higher ranking. So I guess it's like any creature that's out there. It depends on the circumstances, the level of your character, the DM, how it's used, how closely it follows the rules. And of course, this is one of the great things about Dungeons and Dragons that varies considerably from dungeon to dungeon and DM to DM and player to player. Cool stuff. Keeps the game fresh. So, that, my friends, is the ETTERCAP. We hope you found today's presentation to be interesting and amusing and educational and all that kind of good stuff. And if you did, please be so kind as to give us a like. Consider subscribing if you haven't. Definitely share with your friends and drop us a comment. But by all means, please come back and see us again real soon. We thank you so very much for your kind support. Take care, everyone, and remember, dwarves rock!